I am Dr. Mariah Russo Kelly, and I'm an assistant professor of environmental science at Southern Connecticut State University. And it's really a joy to serve as today's lead moderator for this event that we've lined up for you. The event is being live recorded, and a video of the event will be uploaded to the UConn Sustainability YouTube channel directly following. You can find an agenda for the event and more information at uconn.sustainability.edu/climate-justice-teach-in. And you can also submit questions to us live here throughout the duration of the program. And you can do that by going to s.uconn.edu/climate-justice-questions. Though we won't be able to discuss or present all of the questions you ask today, we plan to collect them and just thematically analyze what you ask so that we can all gather a deeper understanding of what audience interests are related to climate justice topics in our state. It's important to note that this is a collaborative effort between the University of Connecticut and Southern Connecticut State University. And it's events like this that really prove that we can be an example of how to collaborate together to raise awareness about climate justice issues in our state. And we can also work together to address some of the more pressing issues. So with that, I'd like to say some thank yous first to the UConn Institute of the Environment and the UConn Office of Sustainability. Y'all are awesome to work with, especially Patrick McKee, the Sustainability Program Manager, and newly hired Betsy Morenson, the Communication Outreach and Education Coordinator there. It's been awesome to get to know you through this process, and you've been also phenomenal to work with. To the Southern Connecticut State University Office of Sustainability and my department, the Department of the Environment, Geography, and Marine Sciences, especially my colleagues, Susie Huminski, who's our Sustainability Coordinator here, and Dr. Stephen Axon, an Assistant Professor of Sustainability Science here in my department. And today's webinar is really just one part of this worldwide climate justice teach-in, which was a spinoff of the Solve Climate by 2030 initiative, which is hosted by Bard College. And it's really a global initiative where hundreds of different communities around the world are going to be hosting events like this today and also in the days to come. So I encourage you to check out what other climate justice topics are being talked about all over the world by going to worldwideteachin.org. In line with this program, we encourage all watching to support efforts to make climate a class. If you're a teacher, we hope you will share this webinar with your class. And if you're a student, we hope you will ask your professors to make climate a class by sharing videos like this in their classes. We believe that it really takes all disciplines and people of different interests to address climate justice. So we encourage you to consider ways you can raise awareness of these topics in your disciplines, whatever they are. Before moving forward, I wish to offer a land acknowledgement statement specific to the state of Connecticut, this land that we call the land of the Long Tidal River. The land on which we gather is a territory of the Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Schaghticoke, Golden Hill Paugussett, Nipmuc, and Lenape peoples, who have stewarded this land through generations. And we thank them for their strength and resilience in protecting this land and aspire to uphold our responsibilities according to their example. Over the next 50 minutes, we'll hear from 2 students and 3 climate justice leaders from around the state. We'll start with student Savannah Cruz, a senior in environmental science, systems, and sustainability at Southern Connecticut State University, and soon to be a graduate. And we'll also hear from Sydneyldden, a first-year student studying environmental science and economics at the University of Connecticut. Then we'll hear from 3 awesome panelists, starting with Alanis Allen, a research analyst in the Office of Climate Planning at the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. Then we'll hear from Yaprak Onat, Assistant Director of Research for the Connecticut Institute for Resilience and Climate Adaptation at the University of Connecticut. Lastly, we'll hear from Alicia Santilli, Director of the Community Alliance for Research and Engagement at Southern Connecticut State University. As Women's History Month comes to a close here, it must be noted that we have an all-women panel of presenters today. When we looked around the state to see who the climate justice leaders are here in Connecticut, we found that women are very much leading the way in this regard. The women we will hear from today already have and will continue to leave their mark in history as they push forward on an array of climate justice actions in our state and beyond. So with that, I will turn it over to Savannah Cruz to hear our student statements. And thank you all for attending today. It's a joy to share this with you.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. So my name is Savannah Cruz. I am a senior environmental science systems sustainability major at Southern Connecticut State University. Within my major, I am focused on coastal marine systems. So I'm graduating this semester, and after that, I plan to attend graduate school and hopefully study more about coral reef restoration efforts. Aside from that, climate justice is very important to me because I am a child of two immigrant parents that come from two smaller islands. My dad is from Central America and my mom is from the West Indies. I look up to my parents. They are a small percentage of people who are lucky enough to immigrate into this country in search of a better life. They always remind me to be grateful for life because there are people across the world who are dealing with bigger issues and don't have as many resources to tackle these issues. Now that I've been studying environmental science for quite some time, I know this to be true more than ever, as climate change continues to disproportionately affect smaller communities across the globe. Climate justice solutions are desperately needed to protect countries across the globe that do not have the resources to survive nor recover from storm systems that are expected to intensify as climate change increases. My parents are from places that most people do spend their holidays. So if we don't advocate for climate justice, then the people that live at these places that make it special to us will cease to exist. I'm proud to be a student at Southern, where they're taking necessary steps to educate our campus community on social and climate justice issues. Last year, Southern attended the COP26 summit in Glasgow, Scotland, as a representative as the Connecticut State University. I was thrilled to see many professors whom I have learned from and look up to attend the same conferences as government representatives and negotiators who are looking to create new collaborations and identify resources for our students. Southern also allowed students to be able to submit questions and ideas that they were interested in for the delegate team to ask. Southern also hopefully we can see Southern take students next year to the next year's COP summit with provide funding for students to be able to attend so it can become an accessible experience for all. Additionally, I believe that all Connecticut state schools should collaborate to advocate more for climate justice on a local scale, since most of our universities are located in areas that are home to majority low-income communities. I would also love to see Southern and more Connecticut state schools create accessible global opportunities that can allow students to travel, as well as research and contribute to worldwide issues. Thank you for listening to me speak. I'm going to hand it off to Sydneylden from UConn.
Thanks, Savannah. When we were asked for our opinion on climate justice, it reminded me of the Mid-Atlantic mini documentary called The Water is Rising and the Girl Must Swim. The title reveals the backdrop of the film and the current state of the world, climate change, the ever-looming threat to humanity, primarily driven by 1% of humanity. Its mere existence produces and imposes climate injustice upon the remaining 99%. Climate change has already impacted many, including the residents of Isle de Jean Charles, whose Louisiana community will soon be underwater due to rising sea levels. They are not the first, and certainly not the last, to face such circumstances that will prove detrimental to communities across the globe, but especially to those who had the most minor role in its causing. Imagine it for a moment. You grow up in a community all your life, attend school, develop relationships, create family traditions, just to have your home washed away by the forces of nature that your own species caused to be misaligned. How can anyone sleep soundly at night when they know that there are countless families whose livelihoods will soon be ripped away due to a problem they didn't cause? Who's to say that yours or mine won't be one of them? While a mere 100 producers have generated more than 70% of world emissions since 1988, continue to pollute our planet, and the top 1% explore cosmic options to avoid the disaster, what is expected for the remaining 99%? As a college student studying environmental science and immersed in articles that at times seem to only project gloom and doom, I constantly find myself wondering what role I play in the relief of my worldly brothers and sisters. How can I, a university student, promote change in myself and my peers and in the world amidst the chaos? I must admit, I'm blessed to attend a university such as UConn that goes beyond educating and encouraging students to think on such topics and provides ample opportunities to play a role in promoting sustainability and climate justice. The Office of Sustainability has led the charge. From incredible resources like the Environmental Justice Toolkit created by UConn students to the unique Eco Captain student job position to engage university residents in these conversations, we can access and educate a diverse future workforce with knowledge of sustainability and climate justice. Economic and business-related majors can consider the environmental consequences of capitalism and consumerism. Those who study the arts can depict captivating scenes that shed light on the injustice climate change has and will cause. If we can help identify our role in the problem, we can unify broad areas of knowledge to construct solutions. This is precisely what UConn encourages and what I deem to be one of the most outstanding qualities of my school and the most important. We recognize that we cannot correct the past missteps, failures, and sins. Even if all emissions were halted at this moment, there are still bountiful repercussions for past political inaction and injustice. However, the present is an ever-changing gift. It can be molded into whatever we desire the future version of it to look like. The path to climate equity will be laborious, but beyond worthwhile to pursue. Like the panelists presenting today and the staff from UConn and SCSU have done, and that Savannah and I will soon be doing, we must be the change we want to see. The water is rising and we have a choice. Will we drown or swim? I declare that we will swim no matter how high the seas may rise, how tumultuous the waters become. There is no other option if we are to truly solve climate by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you to our most exquisite students, and those words are incredibly thoughtful and hopeful. And just a quick reminder here that if you have questions for our students or any of our panelists, go to s.uconn.edu/climate justice questions. So now we will begin our panel, and we will start with Alanis Allen. Alanis is a research analyst in the Office of Climate Planning at the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. Originally born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, she moved to Connecticut for college, where she studied climate change, environmental justice, and public health. During her studies, she was a student associate for the Yale Center on Climate Change and Health and contributed to a project providing technical assistance to an environmental justice community in Alabama. The project propelled her to devote her senior essay to exploring the history of environmental justice progress in the Alabama Department of Environmental Management. She graduated with a bachelor's degree in environmental studies and economics from Yale University. After graduating, she found her current position at DEEP, where she now works on various climate change related projects and programs, including the Governor's Council on Climate Change, also known as GC3, and the newly formed Connecticut Equity and Environmental Justice Advisory Council. Welcome, Alanis, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thank you. Okay, so thank you so much for the introduction. I'm happy to be here. And today I'll just be talking about how climate justice is addressed at the state agency level at the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. So first I'll talk a little bit about the GC3, or the Governor's Council on Climate Change, that was formed or reestablished in 2019. And one of the key working groups was the Equity and Environmental Justice Working Group. So basically the charge of the Governor's Council on Climate Change was to develop several climate-oriented recommendations spanning various subject areas such as mitigation, resilience, adaptation, public health, natural and working lands, forestry. There's many more if you go to our website. And so the equity and environmental justice had a unique charge, which was to, one, develop a public participation guidance, which became very important as the pandemic was just starting when the GC3 was launched again, and as well as review, come up with their own recommendations for how to incorporate equity and environmental justice into climate work at the state level, as well as review other working groups' recommendations. So they developed and used what they call an equity lens to review the work of the other GC3 working groups. And this has kind of led to what more recently has happened, which is Executive Order 21-3. Lots of those recommendations became legislations, or they ended up in this executive order, which was established last December by Governor Lamont. And so Executive Order 21-3, if you look at it, it's very long and lots of interesting climate programs, but I'll highlight two of those climate programs and how they address climate justice. So the first one is the Connecticut Equity and Environmental Justice Advisory Council. And that the council is recently established. They're still picking the members who will sit on the advisory council, but they have picked a chair, which will be announced soon. And the first meeting will be in mid-April. And I will tell you more about how to get all of this information and be able to attend meetings. All the meetings will be public, as were the GC3 meetings, which will continue this year. And basically, the Connecticut Equity and Environmental Justice Advisory Council their charge is to advise deep on historical and current matters of environmental justice, which includes climate work as well as other environmental issues in Connecticut that disproportionately affect vulnerable communities in Connecticut. So I'm very excited to see the changes and opportunities that arise due to the CJAC, which will be coming very soon. And then the second program I wanted to touch on was the Connecticut Community Climate Resilience Program, which will soon, the name will probably be changed before it is officially released. But that program basically is developing a resilience project pipeline, and it's going to be a grant program targeted at municipalities to develop plans for future resilience work or carry out their own resilience projects. And one of the core tenets of the program is that the plan is to target at minimum 40% of the resources at municipalities with vulnerable populations. So that's very important because climate justice is all about centering vulnerable populations. And it's one thing to talk about policy, but it's another thing to make sure that the money is going in the right areas to successfully address the impacts of climate change, especially in Connecticut. And so, kind of in summary, if you would like to know more about these programs that I've talked about, as well as the continuation of the Equity and Environmental Justice Working Group, the establishment of the Connecticut Equity and Environmental Justice Advisory Council, otherwise known as the CJAC, and soon what is to be the grant program, the Community Climate Resilience Program. You can find out all of this information in our newsletter, and I put a QR code here. And that new newsletter comes mostly bi-weekly, and you'll get lots of updates, especially as the spring turns into summer, all of these programs that I've discussed will get up and running. And so if you're more involved in attending these meetings for the CJAC, the GC3 working group, and kind of get involved at climate justice in Connecticut at the state agency level. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Alanis. That is really exciting stuff, and I look forward to learning more about it, like you said, over the summer as things really get ramped up here. So thank you for sharing all of that. Okay, well, let's move on to our next panelist. We have Yaprak Onat. Yaprak is the Assistant Director of Research for the Connecticut Institute for Resilience and Climate Adaptation, also known as CIRCA, at the University of Connecticut. There, she coordinates the planning, development, design, implementation, and evaluation of resiliency projects and combines scientific research with community needs. She received her PhD in ocean engineering from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, which gave her the opportunity to work with environmental issues within diverse communities, and it sparked her interests in working on climate vulnerability and local scale adaptation solutions. Her work at CIRCA led to a climate change vulnerability index and environmental justice screening tools to identify vulnerable regions and their underlying reasons, helping to guide decision makers in policy creation. Her goal is to increase the adaptive capacity of coastal regions via hazard management strategies to develop the most optimal approaches for the sustainability of coastal communities. Welcome, Yapra, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Mariah. Today, I would like to actually emphasize on climate justice as a big part of the problem, which is like the environmental justice too, because both concepts address the just division, fair sharing, and equitable distribution of the benefits and burdens of the climate change and environmental issues. And by definition, climate justice is scientific, political, and economic problem. Therefore, I believe the solutions that we propose should emphasize of these aspects to move on bringing equity over these issues. And of course, these are very broad terms. So I'm going to mention about like how CIRCA is currently approaching these aspects and what are the many ways that we can disseminate these issues. So the first aspect that I mentioned is scientific. We need to push the boundaries with multidisciplinary research to recognize the underserved and overburdened groups under high pollution burden or climate hazard related risks. Understanding the unequal distribution of environmental hazards or risks is important for developing solutions to environmental health disparities. For this reason, CIRCA works on two projects. One is the Climate Change Vulnerability Index that I mentioned, and the other one is environmental justice screening tool. Climate Change Vulnerability Index started as the regional scale, including New Haven and Fairfield counties, and now it's going to expand it to the whole state. Environmental justice screening tool is focusing on the whole state. These tools rank climate-related stressor sensitivity on the communities, or in environmental justice screening tool, we look for the environmental health risk by census tract, and both tools look for the cumulative impacts. Speaking of the environmental justice screening tool, which was the recommendation by Alanis mentioned, that also equity and environmental justice working group from GC3. And we partnered that with Connecticut D. As we are experiencing the impacts of the climate change, understanding which communities are impacted more and what are the underlying reasons behind it is crucial, so that we can diagnose the problem. What is going on in that region, how we are going to direct our resources, and what are the contributing factors to that vulnerability or environmental problem. These tools are designed to give the first look to identify environmental or climate indicators to different socioeconomic variables by providing data-driven insights to decision makers and lead to policy changes. Since I've been talking about decision makers, naturally the second aspect that focuses on the policy. Redistribution decision-making power to the vulnerable communities systematically impacted by the environmental racism and or the climate vulnerability is how we will going to develop solutions to disparities. Just in Connecticut, if you look at our DEEP's website and environmental justice, there are over 600 potential pollution sources in each of the 5 major metropolitan towns: Bridgeport, Hartford, New Haven, Stamford, and Waterbury. These 5 towns combined have the 20% of the pollution, potential pollution sources, 51% of the state's pollution poverty, and 71% of the state's minority population. As you can see, there is a big disparity in these distributions. And a community, academia, and state partnership needs to be built through by listening sessions or workshops to open up planning, discussion, decision-making related to climate and environmental actions. The Environmental Justice Project will also provide several focus groups through next year throughout the state, in especially focusing on the environmental justice communities or the tribal nations, that as much as possible, to a certain community in environmental and health concerns, and review and assess all the data that we combined from the scientific approach into the mapping tool. And the last point that I want to mention is about support, but that can go into the technical support which CIRCA provides, and also an economic support that we try to do it as much as possible. Because climate justice results from centuries of developing and historical and ongoing inequities embedded into our system. And it is a human rights issue. And access to clean air, water, land, and protecting our home is very crucial. So systems of power have typically inflicted harmful environmental and climatic change. Some of the ways to change it are by investing in systematic change that centers on the community-led solutions, or providing funds to create innovative green solutions. As part of the Resilient Connecticut project that CIRCA is leading, we emphasize on the adaptation solutions that are based on PERSIST criteria: permittable, equitable, realistic, safe, innovative, scientific, transferable, and sustainable. These projects that focus on the insight or data resources in support of existing grassroots or frontline communities in the environmental and climate justice movement. And with that, this is generally the focus of like what we are doing it, but it is also very hard to fit it into like a short presentation too. What people can do in supporting CIRCA, because we are combining the scientific approach, modeling aspects, fieldwork approaches, mapping, and the innovative solutions with policymaking and adapting it as like a parallel planning process. And we would like to hear feedback from you through our workshops, or you can reach to us or our focus groups, or just by joining us. You can, in our approach, in multi-scale approach, that we can look at it in state-wise, regional-wise, or in the community-wise, and that's why we are developing that. One solution cannot fit it all, so we have to develop specific solutions, looking into the detail, what are the underlying causes, and that is one of the reasons that we have the Resilient Connecticut project in CIRCA, and also environmental justice screening tool too. If you would like to follow up our information, you can. We have a newsletter, Resilience Roundup. You can contact us from there, or you can go to our website, or just email us from circa@uconn.edu. And with that, I would like to thank you for inviting me to this panel, and looking forward to your questions about more on Resilient Connecticut project or environmental justice screening tool. Thank you.
Thank you, Yaprak. That's fantastic. And I especially appreciate your thoughts on scale and how different systems, really, a systems perspective is necessary for us to think about climate justice at different scales. So thank you for your thoughts and for your work at CIRCA. Next up, we have our third panelist, Alicia Santilli. Alicia is the Director of Community Alliance for Research and Engagement, also known as CARE, at Southern Connecticut State University. Alicia received her Master in Social Work with a concentration in Community Organizing from the University of Connecticut. Recognizing the link between policy change and research, she became interested in public health research as a means for advancing public policy. CARE's work focuses on chronic disease prevention from a policy, system, and environment perspective, examining the ways in which our surrounding communities impact our health. This includes a focus on active transportation, tying together social work, public health, and the environment. CARE's work demonstrates that in order to solve our world's biggest problems, an interdisciplinary approach is imperative, something I think we all can agree on. So with that, I will turn it over to Alicia. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I look forward to hearing more about CARE.
Thank you so much, and thanks everyone for having me for this exciting event, and it was really great to hear from the other panelists and students. So yeah, my name is Alicia Santilli.
Alicia, can you present your slide?
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm gonna launch right into it. Oh, my slides. I just had them up. Oh no, I must have done something. Give me 1 second. Apologies. I somehow closed them out.
While you're doing that too, I can remind our viewers that you can submit questions now and into the future at s.uconn.edu/climate justice questions. There we go. And again, you can submit those now live or in the future for those of you who watch later on. Please also feel free to submit those questions. As I indicated earlier, we'll be using them for different purposes. So it looks like Alicia is ready, and thank you very much.
Sure. So hi everyone again. Sorry about that. I just needed a second to bring my slides back up. My name is Alicia Santilli. I'm with, again, the Community Alliance for Research and Engagement, which is CARE. And excuse me 1 second, I just have to bring my notes up, which disappeared. We are an organization that focuses on public health in New Haven. We actually have been around since 2007. So I'm so sorry. I'm having some technical difficulties here.
Alicia, it seems that when you brought up your notes form, it went to a split screen on us. So
oh, it did. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to have to wing it without my notes. So bear with me. So CARE is an organization based in New Haven, Connecticut, and we are a public health research center. We were started in 2007 at the Yale School of Public Health, and now have a fantastic relationship with Southern Connecticut State University, which is where we're co-housed and where I sit, and have been really happy to be part of the SCSU community. Our mission broadly is to improve health in New Haven. We mostly focus on chronic disease. Oh, that keeps happening. So sorry. We mostly focus on chronic disease prevention. And specifically what we've been interested in, and I'll loop back around to climate change in a minute or two, but chronic disease prevention, how we typically approach it is from a perspective of trying to prevent, encourage people to engage in healthy behaviors. And the two major risk factors for chronic disease are being able to access healthy foods and being able to get physical activity. Some of you who might know a little bit about New Haven or other urban communities across Connecticut and quite frankly across the country, our Black and Brown communities experience much greater health disparities when compared to other populations in New Haven. And so our focus is primarily on working with community members in our neighborhoods that are predominantly Black and Latinx, which is the majority of our communities of color here in New Haven. And really working to engage communities in different processes that we're involved in. And some of you might think of public health and chronic disease prevention and physical activity and nutrition. You might think of sort of the old school way that public health has functioned, which while important, has primarily historically just focused on individual behavior change. So looking at, how many like 5 fruits and vegetables people are eating a day, if people are getting 30 minutes of exercise a day. Over the past 10, 15 years, the public health world around chronic disease prevention has really evolved to take a more comprehensive approach and starting to understand that, you know, individual behavior change alone is never going to fix our chronic disease epidemics that we have in the United States. And what we really need to be doing is looking at our policies, systems, and the built environment, what we often call PSEs, policy systems and environments, and how our communities are set up to actually help people engage in healthy behaviors. And underscoring all of this, we have a focus on social determinants of health, which if we have time, I can describe that a little bit more. But for the purposes of today, I wanted to really show how the public health community can come together with climate activists and other coalitions and community organizations to address climate change. And just emphasize how important it is to have interdisciplinary approaches to this work. So CARE is funded through the Centers for Disease Control through a program called REACH, Racial and Ethnic Approaches to Community Health. It is specifically a chronic disease prevention program that we have here in New Haven. But there is a huge component that overlaps with climate activism. And specifically, and really, really interestingly, and I find this very exciting, the CDC has really taken up this trend with public health and understanding that we need to be looking at our communities as a whole. And so they have shifted from figuring out, you know, from encouraging through these grant programs communities to make sure people are exercising 30 minutes a day and really understanding, wait a minute, we need to make sure that our environments, our communities that we're walking in are walkable and bikeable, and that people can get exercise through getting from point A to point B in their everyday activities. So this has been a huge shift for the CDC, and specifically, we have 3 strategies that we focus on with this grant, and one of the strategies is around physical activity, and the entire focus is on promoting active transportation. So as you can imagine, as we're promoting active transportation here in New Haven, we're building coalitions with lots of folks who have different interests for making sure that we have active transportation. We work really closely with neighborhood groups, because if you go to any neighborhood group in any city in Connecticut, the thing you will hear folks complain about the most is the condition of streets and sidewalks and being able to cross the road and being able to get from point A to point B. So working with neighborhood groups and of course, people who are interested in climate activism. We work with a couple of really great groups on the ground level that are promoting active transportation more from a climate perspective. So our whole strategy for active transportation is working in coalition with these community groups and with the City of New Haven, the Transportation Department, to develop what we're calling Safe Routes for All. It's an active transit master plan for the entire city. And it's the first time, and this is something, again, that the CDC at the federal level is, from a public health, chronic disease prevention perspective, is encouraging communities to do. This is something that they specifically asked for in their funding opportunity statements. So we are working with the Transportation Department at the City of New Haven to develop a blueprint for improving infrastructure to support active transportation throughout the whole city. And this is the first time that something like this has been done in New Haven. We have a variety of different plans for maybe a specific neighborhood or a specific project. If a new building is getting built, you know, the intersections right around a specific building. But this is the first time that we have a bike plan. We have a plan about some sidewalks in New Haven. This is the first time we're bringing everything together comprehensively to really map out what active transportation can look like. Well, I'll get back to this in a second. Let me tell you a little bit more about what's in the plan. So there's 3 components. There's Walk New Haven, Ride New Haven, and Bike New Haven. So Walk New Haven is all about focused improvements for things like crosswalks, sidewalks, cross signals, making sure people can walk safely in their neighborhoods. Ride New Haven is looking at buses and bus stops. We don't have a lot of control over the actual bus routes in New Haven because that is handled by CT Transit. But looking at our bus stops and how easy it is and how accessible bus stops are and how safe they feel is an important component and really encouraging people to ride the bus. And then Bike New Haven is proposing bikeways, bike lanes, different bike infrastructure across the city. So what we're doing, we're just in the final phases of pulling together and finalizing this whole plan. It will then go through our Board of Alders, which is the equivalent to City Council here in New Haven. And it will hopefully pass through the Board of Alders and get adopted as the official plan for active transportation for the city of New Haven. And then moving forward, anytime there is a improvement or there's, you know, funding from the state or capital funding within the city, and they're going to go and pave a road, they have to go back to this plan and look at like what kind of striping needs to be, what kind of intersections need to be installed, how they, if there's a plan for improving that particular street, bike lanes and things like that. So it's a really exciting opportunity from a policy level to really embed a plan that you know, passes through legislative process and makes it the official plan, so that it essentially mandates that the city has to follow this. And it's been just a really exciting opportunity to bring together a variety of coalitions to work on this from a variety of perspectives. And I think this is one of the best examples that we have here locally in terms of interdisciplinary approaches around public health issues and tying in climate change and fighting for climate justice. I think that was all I had to say. I did not get a chance to look at my notes, but thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alicia. And certainly there's time still to talk more about some of the other topics you might have wanted to cover. And I appreciate your attention to those intersections between health and transportation, which is one of those areas where I think a lot of students are interested in getting involved. So I look forward to hearing more about what's happening here in New Haven, right in our backyard.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. So we do have some questions coming in, and this is going to move us into the Q&A portion of our agenda here. So I will invite all of our presenters to please come on screen. And we have a questions form that we're pulling from, and our students, Savannah Cruz and Sydneyldden, will take turns asking questions to the panelists. So I will turn it over to first, I guess, Savannah, you can ask the first question, and then we'll go to Sydney. But Savannah, Sydney, and Alicia, yeah, please come on screen.
Thank you. Dr. Kelly, should I start with the public questions or?
Sure, yeah, you can start. We had a couple of public questions come in, so we could start with the one for Yaprak.
Okay, great. So the first question for Yaprak is, living by the water in Connecticut, it is very apparent that there is little to none public access to the shoreline. What are some ways to help grant more access to the water for those who do not live directly on the shoreline?
Okay, now I can get them. That's actually a very big issue for Connecticut because like a private versus the public property is limiting and disadvantageously affecting the communities. So this is not just like a scientific issue. This needs to be embedded with the policy as well. Like what would be a good way to reach access to these shorelines? There is also an the impact of the sea level rise is going to change these access points too. So the private properties that think that they can have like the access is going to not going to lead to it, and then the shoreline is going to already a limited part that have the public access is going to reduce more and more. the question about like how we can make equal opportunity for everybody to reach the already existing shorelines is, I think, in two aspects that we need to look for it. One is like providing adaptation solutions to protect those shorelines, first of all. And the second one is to lead to policy changes, because we need to consider about like what is going on in the community and how we can actually bring the equity in that region so that we can create these new shorelines, new opportunity areas, and then change some of like the already inherited approach that the public cannot get access to it. And that's what I'm thinking, is that it's going to need a policy change in the state level and private properties, and also it needs to protect these shorelines to incoming effects of the flooding or the sea level rise with adaptation options.
Great, thank you.
And this is a question for Alanis. Someone was wondering if you have any tips on how to find local organizations who are doing work for climate justice. They live in the Willimantic area near both UConn and Eastern, but it's hard to know where to find organizations that are not specifically for students. They'd like to get more involved, especially with the safe walking issue.
Sure. It's interesting because even though I'm in this space, I've kind of had my own want to get involved. I live in Bridgeport, get involved with environmental activists in Bridgeport. But I think personally, I can reach out to our environmental justice program has like contacts all over the state. So I have people in mind who definitely know organizations in Willimantic. So I think, let's see, if you send an email to deep.climatechange@ct.gov, I'll get that email and I could forward it to my environmental justice program colleagues, and they'll definitely have a group of contacts that definitely in the Willimantic area, I believe. So, yeah.
Okay, so the next question is for Alicia. Addressing climate justice should be a key part of climate action, but this requires effective collaboration and partnerships. Which actors, stakeholders, and/or institutions do you think are needed to be involved with addressing the priorities you've outlined?
Great question. In terms of the work that we do here in New Haven around active transportation, so I would say the most important stakeholders, first and foremost, are community members and community groups, particularly community groups that represent neighborhoods that are predominantly Black and Brown. And this is actually one of the roles that CARE plays, is ensuring that voices are heard that might not normally be invited to tables or be at the table. And so working really closely with community members to ensure that their voice is heard in the process and that they're providing input into the process. So we did quite a lot of outreach and door knocking and going to community meetings to make sure that people were aware that this plan was being developed and encourage them to get involved and provide input. And there was a variety of ways to provide input, from like public meetings to surveys and us just getting input out on the street. So community members first and foremost. Other community groups that might intersect. So there's a few bike and safe streets advocacy organizations here in New Haven. So working with them is really important. And I think the challenging thing, and I think a role that we often play at CARE as an organization is, we have to work with city government. And a lot of times residents, are not happy to work with city government because they are jaded about processes and bureaucracy and unfair practices within City Hall sometimes. So, feeling like their voices aren't being heard and responded to. So sort of, further being marginalized from processes because, it's such a bureaucratic headache to deal with municipalities sometimes. But it's so important to have, to identify key people internal to City Hall who are champions for this work and can help to move it forward and to learn how to work with them effectively. Other stakeholders, other organizations that are interested in health, and again, of course, climate change. A lot of our community organizations that we work with are interested in health in some capacity. So I'd say those are the major stakeholders.
This question is for Yaprak. What are the data sources for environmental justice tools? How is this different than EPA EJ screen?
EPA EJ screen is also looking for, try to identify, and it's a screening too, we are doing that to show the environmental pollution burdens. And they also put some of the socioeconomic groups over there too. It is not really showing a cumulative impact, and it is a national tool. So one of the advantages that we are developing this environmental justice screening tool for Connecticut, so that it is not a one-size-fits-all, and that it is not the national kind of a tool is good for the federal agencies to divert their impacts and resources, which state, it's crucial right now, we need to do it. But in state level, and in also local level, more regional level, COG level, or the community-wise, in census tracts, different census tracts, that is comparing from North Carolina to Connecticut is not gonna work. So we need to compare, we need to understand what is going on within our state, and that's why it is specifically tailored for our state. That is the difference between the general EPA's EJ screen tool. The data sources, you can look at it the initial suggestions from GC3's Environmental Justice Equity Group's report. They grouped that under 4 categories, which are environmental effects, environmental exposures, sensitive populations, and socioeconomic factors. These data, there's a whole list of it, and these are the first attempts that we looked for them. And then from those suggestions, we try to look for what would be the best way that we can improve these data suggestions and what is actually fitting that. Because when they prepared that report, which was a very good initial attempt, they look for the already other available states like the Washington or California or Maryland, how they did it. But some of the data sets are not really fitting to our region too, or we have different options too. That's why we have 2 groups that we are listening and data suggestions from them too. One is the state data advisory group, and the other one is a mapping tool advisory group, and also the focus group, so that we can incorporate Connecticut specific data, so we can tailor this tool for our needs, our state needs.
Okay. So this next question is for Alicia. This is a question from me. So as someone who lives in New Haven, I always, when I'm taking my dog out and going for a walk, I always notice that there's a good amount of trash and also broken glass. It makes it very difficult to travel along the sidewalks. So what kind of initiatives or incentives do you think the city needs to create to reduce this issue of littering?
That is such a great question that also, impacts. I try and ride my bike to work most days, and there's actually, I live way on the east side of town, and there's this awesome separated bike lane on Water Street that I love to take because it's off the street and very protected. But it is always littered with glass. So I often end up going on the street, which is so, what's the point of having a bike lane if there's glass all over it and I can't ride on it? So, yeah, that's a really a good question, and definitely something that we should address. I'm not aware of any specific initiatives, with the exception of logging things in See-Click-Fix locally, and, supposedly Public Works sees those and, is supposed to act on all of the quote unquote tickets that come through the system. So that's an immediate action that folks can take. In terms of longer term actions, yeah, I would love to see some sort of campaign around litter. I know that some of our local community groups, like in the summers, for example, we have a youth at work program, and we have an infrastructure here in New Haven called community management teams, and those community management teams have hired youth through Youth at Work in the summer to clean up certain neighborhoods and keep on top of that. There's actually a really good model in downtown New Haven. The Downtown Green, which is like a private organization, hires ambassadors, and one of their roles is to help keep the streets clean. So I think we need more programs like that where we're paying folks to help us keep our streets clean. Jobs are always a really good incentive. But I would love to see other programs as well, where maybe certain communities get a little bit of additional money if they all pitch in to help keep their streets clean. And just, it's such a pet peeve. I don't understand why people throw things out their windows. Like, I just don't even understand it. So we clearly need some sort of campaign around like, don't throw glass bottles out your window.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the job portion. If we had, or like giving like a grant to different types of neighborhoods, like if we had that, then definitely people would do like a whole neighborhood cleanup.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Think we might have time for one last question for Alanis.
Alanis, how can youth and young adults promote and inspire others to have climate hope in their communities?
That's an interesting question. I think because we all, especially people around my age, it's kind of easy to get lost in like the bad news of it all and like despair. I think personally for me, what keeps me going there is definitely, I think at the state level, like it's hard. Even at the federal level, with like a more favorable administration, sometimes it's hard to see these huge like climate legislations that you want passed and would make everything better. It's hard to see that, but I think at the state and local level, there's so much progress being made, especially as like funds come down, even from the federal level. So I think looking locally and trying to act more locally, I think is definitely helps combat that kind of despair that feels kind of like easy to default to sometimes.
Yeah, actually, one of the tenets of the Worldwide Teach-In initiative is to move people from despair to determination. And so I think that's a great place for us to end our webinar today in this vein of hope and being able to use this as an opportunity to look around our communities and our state to see that there is an amazing amount of action actually going on. And I really appreciate all of the information that our panelists shared about how people listening can actually get involved in that. So with that, I would encourage all of you watching to reach out to our panelists. Feel free to reach out to me or either of our students if you have questions or have ideas about how we can all work together to really make a difference in the climate justice realm. I appreciate you all for being here today and for your time in attending to these really important issues. And I guess with that, just stay tuned for more events like this and additional collaborative efforts that UConn and Southern Connecticut State University put together around these topics in the months and years to come. So thank you all for watching. Take care, and we'll see you all next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.